In a proud tradition of all the great movie trilogies, Lord of the Rings, Back to the Future, The Matrix, Police Academy 3, and Scream 3, I present to you Information Technology Governance Part 3.
In Information Technology Governance Part 3, we're going to focus on information security management as it relates to IT governance. We'll look at 5 key areas: personnel management, insourcing and outsourcing, organizational change management, IS quality management, and finally, performance management. Information systems management practices are going to be a functional reflection of the way that you implement your policies and procedures for various management activities. In a typical organization, the IS department functions as a service organization or a service entity. Its goal to help production departments do their operations more effectively and more efficiently. But as we saw earlier, IS has become a much more integral part of every area of the operation of the organization. Let's refer back to that SONA diagram real quick. Remember how our infrastructure services are at the heart of our organization or our business, with the business applications and collaboration applications sitting on top of that. It's highly unlikely there's going to be a reversal of this trend, so information system auditors have to understand and have to appreciate the extent to which this well-managed IS infrastructure and all of its services are critical and crucial to the organizational objectives. Management activities that review the policy formulations and procedures and their effectiveness in the IS department include things like personnel management, insourcing and outsourcing, organizational change management, IS quality management, and performance management. Let's tackle each of these IS management practices one at a time. The first area is personnel management, and don't forget, we're still looking at this general umbrella of information technology governance. So under that umbrella, personnel management relates to us as auditors. We want to make sure that there's organizational policies and procedures for all different types of things that relate to personnel and its effect on information resources, its effect on information technology, making sure that it's effective, that it relates to the individual IS function, and how the impact of the quality of the personnel and the performance of the staff relates to information security duties. So we want to look at things like, does the company or organization have in place employee handbooks that include the policies and procedures, and do these map to the organizational goals and the direction of the company or the business? Employee handbooks should be distributed to all employees at the day they're hired. You should have information in there like the security policies and procedures, the expectations of the organization, maybe information on benefits and vacation days, things relating to time off, overtime, maybe non-disclosure agreements, outside employment and contracting policies, ongoing evaluations for employee performance, maybe some emergency information, and of course, stuff that's related to termination or disciplinary action, excessive absences, if you break the confidentiality agreement or any aspect of the security policy, overall non-compliance. There should be a published kind of code of conduct and mission statement for the organization that kind of lays out all of the employees' duties within the organization. You can go on the web and find some sample PDF files for employee handbooks or Word documents. They're easy to find. Let me just show you real quickly a couple of examples that I found just doing a simple Google. Here's a sample employee handbook in PDF format. Just kind of shows you it's a couple of years old. This doesn't represent any specific company. It's very generic. So you would want to make sure that you are adhering to your corporate security policy, your overall rules and regulations and policies and procedures, and your legal department. But you can see it's broken down in different areas, an overall purpose, mission, value statement, and then it just lays out in this beginning table of contents, individual employment policies, business hours, the confidentiality agreement, dress code, conflict of interest, rehiring eligibility, holidays, that type of information. Stuff that relates to expense reports, membership in other organizations, other types of personnel issues like substance abuse policies, safety and security. Then, of course, it goes into insurance benefits information, and then, voting, and then it kind of starts breaking it down. You can see this is a generic little employee handbook that a company could use. So this is a PDF example of one that's out there with some neat little Microsoft generic graphics there. I've also got one in Word format. Let's take a look at that. Here's a sample company policies and procedures handbook in Word format, and you can see this is from the PIC, Printing Industries of California, and you can just see it just shows you can join this organization. It gives you, here's their table of contents for their overall employee handbook. Similar informations, your industry reference checks, employee classifications, independent contractor information, temp, leased personnel. It just kind of goes on and on. And again, this is just a general idea. And so I'd like to see you go ahead and add to your knowledge base, go ahead and add to your overall set of resources some samples that you can find on the internet in PDF format or Word format for an employee handbook. Another aspect of personnel management is hiring and termination policies, or hiring and firing. With hiring, we're looking at things like signing confidentiality agreements, non-compete agreements, conflict of interest statements, looking into background checks, possibly bonding employees, looking at the risks versus the rewards of having temporary employees, contractors versus employees, and things like insourcing and outsourcing, which we'll look at in a little bit greater detail later on. In addition, your organization should have written termination policies that are established with clearly defined goals and procedures for separating your company from an employee. Built into this is properly protecting your organization's assets and your organization's data while also adhering to legal standards. For example, some of the control procedures would be things like returning all of the access keys, ID cards, and badges that are used for physical access, revoking logon IDs and passwords to terminate system access, notifying staff and security personnel, arranging for the final payment of salary or bonuses and other compensation, possibly conducting a termination review to get more information to help management in the future with dealing with personnel, and of course returning all company property. All good companies should have a promotion or advancement policy, fair and fully comprehended by all the employees. It should be based on objective criteria, not subjective criteria, and should look at the individual worker's performance, experience, responsibility level, and education, including ongoing education and certification. As an IS auditor, we want to make sure that the IS organization has properly structured policies and procedures for advancement, and make sure that the company is following those policies and procedures to the letter. Along with that, as an auditor, we want to make sure that the company has ongoing training and continuing education. If you're going to have advancement and promotion policies, you want to make sure that there's objective standards for advancement. And training and continuing education is really a part of this. If you're going to be compensating the employee or paying the employee, that should be well laid out in the policy as well. Ongoing security training is a key aspect to information security in your organization. Also, as far as personnel management, we look at scheduling the employees, reporting, for example, expense reports, usage reports, vacation, time off, those types of things. And of course, finally, evaluations. Evaluating on a regular basis, on a quarterly basis, on a biannual or annual basis, the performance of the actual individual employee. This should be a standard regular feature for all of the information security staff. Involved in this, besides the auditor, of course, is the Human Resources Department. Based on performance, an auditor is looking for salary increments, salary increases, performance bonuses, and promotions or advancement based on this performance evaluation. Now, I've already briefly alluded to this concept, which really relates to personnel management, and that's the concept of insourcing and outsourcing. Our sourcing practices are going to tie closely to where our organization is going to obtain its IS functionality, the support needed to run our business. We can run all of our IS functions in-house. This is called insourcing. Or we could outsource all of the functions internationally. Now, there's technically three ways to deliver information security functions. Insourcing, which the IS functionality is performed by the organization's staff. Outsourcing, which is fully performed by a vendor's staff. Or hybrid, which is what I find most often, a mix of the organization staff and the vendor staff. And this would be things like also including joint ventures, temporary employees, supplemental employees, things like that. Now, this IS functionality, even though it can be delivered in three different fashions and performed across the globe, you can then take advantage of other types of methodologies like on-site sourcing, where the staff works on-site in the IS department. Again, they can be insourced or outsourced and still be on-site, or they could be off-site. And again, your insourced or outsourced can be either on-site or off-site. Off-site, of course, is also known as what we call near shore, where the staff is working in a remote location in the same geographical area, or we have what's called offshore. And this would be, let's say, using programmers over in India or Pakistan, for example. As an auditor, you should realize that this insourcing and outsourcing strategy should be part of the IS steering committee's responsibilities. They're the ones that should review the strategy. They need to define what IS functions are going to be outsourced, if any. They're going to look at the service level agreements that are necessary, kind of the minimum requirements. They need to know what, the service providers, if you're outsourcing to service providers, they need to know their knowledge level, their skills, what kind of qualities, what kind of services they provide. They also need to have information based on in-house costs so they can compare in-house or in-sourcing costs to outsourcing costs. As an auditor, you should look at the rationale, reasons for doing an outsourcing solution. How does it affect the critical goals of your organization? Profit margins? Does it increase competition? Does it provide the flexibility you need in your organization and IS structure? So the reasoning, the different services, data entry, operations processing, security, web-based, design, development. What types of services are you going to outsource? What are the advantages of outsourcing? What are the disadvantages? One advantage could be the fact that a third-party solution will be able to dedicate more time and be more focused efficiently on certain tasks, certain projects, than an in-source solution. In-source personnel, typically they're pulled in many directions. Disadvantages or downsides are loss of control over information security, loss of control over services, and the potential for litigation if a vendor does not meet their requirements. And then, of course, how are you going to resolve the risk and the vulnerabilities introduced by outsourcing? As an auditor, you need to review the outsourcer contracts and service level agreements to make sure that they're clear and concise and cover all the bases. They should probably adhere to CMM or ISO standards or methodologies to give you a standard process for looking at the processes and procedures to make sure they meet standards. You need to consider the challenges of globalization, the challenges, for example, of outsourcing to the UK or to India. You need to look at legal, tax issues, regulatory issues, government issues, the ability to export certain types of encryption technologies, for example. You need to look at continuity of operation when you're dealing with the globalization of outsourcing, personnel issues, language issues, telecommunications issues, the differences between network infrastructures overseas and in the United States, and of course cross-cultural and cross-border issues. And then as an auditor, finally, you'll have to kind of take a look at the way the organization or the company is managing their overall third-party service delivery, whether it's a third-party vendor working with in-source personnel or whether it's an outsourced third-party solution or a hybrid solution. The delivery of services, the monitoring of third-party services, the review of the solutions, and managing any changes to third-party services, changes to the actual service or component itself, or actual changes in vendors. All of these things need to go into the grand scheme of analysis for an auditor. Another key aspect of IT governance is making sure that there's some process in place, some documentation relating to changes in the information systems or information security infrastructure. And that would be what we call change management. Now, change management can be an entire discipline, or it can be based on a software solution. There's many change management applications for Unix and Linux. I think Microsoft uses what's called SharePoint, which is a great solution that kind of ties into its newest version of Microsoft Office and into Active Directory that can be used for change management. But basically, when we look at change management from an IS perspective, typically it's that information systems or IT group, that unit of the business, that's our central catalyst for technological change. And the reason I say that is because even though typically directives are going to flow downward from the top, maybe from a CIO, maybe from some other senior management, typically the new technology, the new applications, the new services, the new software, the people that are part of the IT and IS groups, those are the ones that have their finger on the pulse of technological change and the things that are coming down the pipe. So typically these new ideas, these new change management ideas are going to come from lower level departments, even though from time to time directives may come from the top. It really depends upon how forward-looking your CIO is. Now, we need support regardless of whether this comes from a lower level position. These new changes in security mechanisms, new changes in technology application, and so forth, you need to have some type of management sponsor, some senior management sponsor. And of course, along with this, some really good communication process. I mentioned SharePoint. And then you want to make sure that you're always including feedback from consultants, perhaps, from team members, people like us, auditors, for this change management process. And there are change management solutions built into network operating systems, for example, like Windows 2003 and Vista. And realize also part of this change management, since it may deal with procurement of new applications and new software, even new hardware, it may include change management from a financial standpoint and a budgetary standpoint. In addition to change management, kind of the next step is what we would call, again, this is once the changes are put into place, we look at the existing processes, the existing applications. We want to look at what we would call quality management. The final IS management practice that we're going to look at is organizational quality management. And this is basically the manner in which your IS department-based processes are going to be measured, that are going to be controlled or managed, and improved upon ultimately. Organizational quality management, or QM, is a system or a set of documents, documentation, manuals, and records by which IS department-based processes will be managed, controlled, measured, and improved. Typically, quality management is based on some type of industry standard. For example, ISO 9001-2000 quality management systems. Let me show you the website where you can find this QM system. If you go up to the website of the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO.org, you can follow this URL here, and you'll find information on ISO management systems. Over here on the left, you'll see some areas you can go to find out more about the systems, the basic information, facts on ISO certification. You see, your company, your organization can actually, for its quality management goals, get certified by the ISO and have that as part of your documentation. As you move down here, you can see that ISO 9000 and other versions or other standards apply to a wide variety of different disciplines. For example, ISO 14000 applies to environmental management, which is a really big area right now. And you can see here's quality management principles, the 8 QM principles on which ISO 9000-2000 is based. If I click on that link, I can go look at this. If we scroll down here, we can see that this particular set of principles is the integral reproduction of the content of the document entitled Quality management principles. And as we scroll down here, we can see the 8 main areas, the 8 main principles: customer focus, leadership, involvement of people, process approach, system approach to management, continual improvement, factual approach to decision making, and mutually beneficial supplier relationships. And it goes step by step through each one of these principles, the benefits, and how to apply these principles. I would recommend highly adding this to your knowledge base, one of your favorites in your web browser, as well as to your knowledge base. Now, as I mentioned, QM applies across the board to many different disciplines, many different areas of the organization. But for IT governance and information systems management, really what applies to us? What are the main areas that we're concerned with applying quality management techniques, quality management systems to? Well, of course, just the daily operations of your IS and IT department. You want to apply quality management principles to software management and software acquisition, security auditing, and penetration testing. That is, using tools and techniques to look for vulnerabilities and threats that are existent in your organization. Look for weaknesses on the perimeter of your security, as well as physical security and access control mechanisms and other controls. Also, network operating system administration, just general administration that you would find, let's say, in Windows 2003. You want to apply quality management techniques to that to make sure that all the things are there. And we also want to look at human resource management. That really ties in what we've been talking about so far in this nugget movie on IT governance. As an IS auditor, you want to assure that companies are using effective practice of QM, that they're documenting everything in a very organized and understandable fashion. You also want to make sure that you're creating reports and summaries with the results of quality management, and make sure that the QM is being applied to the critical business functions. Realize that finances may also come into play, and budgets may also be audited to see if they are in line with quality management. Well, our goal here is to make sure that our organization is arriving at an operational level and in all different aspects of the organization. But again, we're focusing here on IT, information security, that is in measurable terms, that is duplicatable, that's reliable, and, if necessary, IT certified by the ISO. That being said, the auditor may perform what's called a gap analysis. In other words, they'll go to that website I just showed you, look at all the documentation, the ISO 9001-2000 quality management documentation, and then do a gap analysis against the organization. Find out where the weaknesses are, the holes, find out where the gaps are, and then put into place some recommendations for filling those gaps for quality management as it relates to different aspects of the organization. We want to make sure that the functionality is properly deployed and well documented for a wide variety of different areas. Now, I've mentioned these different areas or alluded to them. And what are these areas? Well, they're things like acquiring software systems, implementing software and maintenance of the software, ongoing change management, computer operations, acquiring and maintaining hardware, management reporting and security reporting using, let's say, Secure Shell or SNMP version 3 or some other third party, let's say Cisco Works, physical security of your organization, logical security, planning for the short term and the long term, time reporting, logging to a syslog server, or using the SDEE protocol for creating logs, human resource management. This may mean putting together or making sure that a quality management or a QM manual exists, kind of like our employee manual we looked at earlier, a quality manual. This is basically one of the clauses, and I'm mentioning here several clauses of ISO 9001 are going to affect us as auditors. For example, making sure that a quality manual exists, basically a reference document to the established and maintained quality management systems and processes involved. Also, human resources, HR ties in directly. It's tightly coupled to quality management as it relates to personnel. And again, an auditor may be coming in and doing a ISO 9001-2000 quality management system process audit, either internal or external, either somebody in the organization or an external third party doing a quality management audit, depending on the policies and procedures in place of the organization. Another aspect of IT governance is performance management as it relates to information technology systems, information systems, security as well. Performance management is an ongoing process that's driven by performance indicators and metrics. And these indicators and metrics are generally things stored in a database of an operating system, whether it be a network operating system like Windows 2003 or Linux or Unix, or possibly the operating system like the iOS of a Cisco router or server or multi-layer switch. Other dedicated appliances will also have their own performance metrics. Some of these metrics can be trapped for usage by Simple Network Management Protocol, SNMP, or you can use other built-in tools or third-party tools to basically establish and update what we call performance baselines. One of the first things we'll do with performance management is to establish a baseline of normal activity. Then, when there's any variance or deviation from this normal baseline, we can use that to help us either fix bottlenecks or tweak our systems to optimize our performance. Performance management also is used to implement accountability guidelines. In other words, making sure the departments are properly implementing their services and their systems to meet organizational goals. A big part of performance management is collecting and analyzing the data, typically with some type of software tool, and then generating reports and summaries that can be given to team leaders, engineers, middle managers, and the like. Once this data is delivered in a summary or a report, we can then use this information to measure and manage applications, products, and services, and possibly lead to replacing hardware, software, or upgrading hardware, software. Again, the main goal here is to optimize our performance. And as I mentioned earlier, many built-in tools can be found in network operating systems and networking operating systems. For example, let's just take a look at a tool on this Windows XP machine that can also be found on servers in the Microsoft world. What we're looking at here is a management console for my Windows XP machine, and it's something that can be done in a similar fashion on a Windows 2000 or 2003 server. And basically what I'm looking at is a combination of two tools, the system monitor, and I've also got performance logs and alerts, which gives me the ability to generate logs of certain metrics, certain activity on a system or systems. And then I can also trace certain activity and create alerts that can be sent to an administrator's email or a pager or the like. What I'm looking at here is performance information. Pages per second. This has to do with my memory cache. Average disk queue length, things that are waiting to be processed, percentage processor time, processor queue length, threads waiting to be processed, and percent usage. Again, we can add a whole wide variety of metrics or indicators based on the system we're using and the different applications that are installed. If this were an Exchange server or a web server, I would find additional objects under here, additional metrics and indicators that I could add, and I could go through and I could monitor my performance. Now, as I mentioned, one of the first things you do is you go in and you can see I can get an explanation here. You go in and you create a baseline of normal activity. So you monitor your system, create logs, trace the activity over a period of a week or 2 weeks. You're going to do this during normal activity. You're also going to measure this during peak activity and then generate reports. And then based on this information, it will help you establish whether you're optimizing your systems properly. And then if you need to, you can acquire new hardware, new software, or make modifications to your systems based on expert input. Now, as an auditor, you will not need to know how to use these tools. For the CISA exam, for example, understanding how these tools work isn't part of your job description. But as an auditor, you want to make sure that there are performance management techniques, software, processes in place that are meeting this goal of the organization. Well, in this final movie of the Information Technology Governance series of this CISA nugget, we covered 5 key areas. We looked at personnel management, we talked about insourcing and outsourcing, organizational change management, information system or security quality management, and performance management. I hope this CBT Nugget's been informative for you. I want to thank you for viewing. We'll see you in the next movie.